Okay guys, this is part 2 extended of my first video on Biden's issue, on what he's doing with the campaign. If you guys didn't see that yet, then make sure and go see that, because unfortunately, this is I couldn't put this all in one video because YouTube literally will not process the video. So make sure and go check that out and you can see directly for yourself. You can see the first part. This part won't make sense without the first part. So click on the link. I'll have links in the description and somewhere up here. You can click on that link to go to part 1, but this is part 2. So we'll just go ahead and we'll keep going with it. Also guys, if you haven't yet, I just want to let you know, make sure and like this video, because if you like this video, you subscribe, hit notifications, comment, share the content, you'll be eligible to win a $100 gift card. So make sure and do that, because I want people to get as much money as possible. The more times you comment, the more times you share, the more chances you have to win. Okay, on with part 2. So he says, throughout my campaign, I laid out my Build Back Better plan. We laid out a plan that an independent analysis put out by Moody's. He said we would create 18.6 million jobs. We talked about the electric vehicle market, so all of that. So, and by the way, he talks a lot about job creation, which I think is fantastic. Now, so did Trump, and Trump was great at creating jobs. He was really, really good about getting the economy up and running. And you're gonna hear actually a lot of Trump's, it's so funny, as much as Trump has really been attacked for all of his economic policies, Biden is echoing several things Trump has been putting in place. Again, though, nobody is going to, in the media, come after Biden the way they do Trump. Remember? The mainstream media, who on all sides of it, they shut down stories about, a guy named Jeff and his plane and a guy named Weinstein. I don't trust these people. So he says it's based on a simple premise. Time to reward work, not just wealth in America. We're going to have a fair tax structure that makes sure the wealthiest among us and corporations pay their fair share. Our plan will create millions of good-paying union jobs in manufacturing, building the vehicles, products, technologies that we're going to need for the future to compete with the rest of the world. From autos to our stockpiles, we're going to buy American. No government contract will be given to companies that don't make their products here in America. To secure our position as a global leader in research and development, we're going to invest $300 billion in the most critical, competitive new industries and technologies, creating 3 million good-paying jobs. And the corporate American technology firms like Microsoft on the call, they agree. We can make sure a future is made here in America that's good for businesses, it's good for American workers. I think this part is fantastic. We need more American paying jobs. We need to bring jobs home. That was one thing that Trump administration has been super, super big on, is we have allowed our jobs to go overseas and outsource too much. We need to bring them back and give incentives to bring back companies to America to give our people work. And I think that's fantastic. I think that absolutely should happen. So I'm glad to hear that they're in line with that, and they're really in line with wanting to make sure that things are American made and make sure that workers here have enough jobs and are taken care of. I like it so far. So far, I like it. So he says, we can also modernize infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports, 1.5 million new affordable housing units, high-speed broadband we talked about for every American household, which is more important than ever for remote learning, remote working, telemedicine, the 21st century, building a digital infrastructure to help businesses, healthcare workers, first responders, and students. $100 billion to rebuild our crumbling schools. They talk about the need, the business community talked about the need to invest in HBCUs, and that's colleges that are primarily for minorities or Black. He says, in community colleges, retrofitting 4 million new buildings, our old buildings, retrofitting them to make them new. Weatherizing 2 million homes. What does he mean by weatherizing? Hold on, I want to look this up. Weather. I'm going to just Google it while I talk to you guys. Weatherizing. I'm not really talking to y'all. It's so funny. I know I'm interacting with you guys, but I'm like in a room by myself. Remember like 20 years ago, somebody just talking to themselves in a room? People are going to think you're crazy, even if you have a camera on you. And now it's like totally normal. Like, think about it. People are walking down the street just talking. And before it's like, oh, that's a crazy guy. Now it's like, oh, he's talking to somebody in his ear. It's just weird. So it says weatherization or weatherproofing, and that's British English, I guess, is the practice of protecting a building and its interior from the elements, particularly from sunlight, precipitation and wind, and modifying a building to reduce energy consumption and optimize energy efficiency. So I wonder if this has to do with what he was saying about, needing to do things for climate change. Now, you know that Kamala Harris is also kind of in the same, she runs in the same crowd as like AOC, and AOC, she's really big about she has a bill that she's tried to put into place where basically it would spend way too much money trying to make everything energy efficient and run smoothly for climate change, and it would not be feasible. Like, it's a really, how to put this, I appreciate the passion and I like the idea, but it also has to be something we can implement in society as we're at now. And unfortunately, I think we have at the moment more pressing things to look at because of everything going on. So I just thought that was interesting. I'm like, what's weatherizing? And why would you need to weatherize 2 million? I guess he's talking about making them energy efficient, but I don't know. He says building more climate resilient cities and towns. There we go. So that just clarified it. These investments will specifically communities of color, so we can break those cycles where in good times they lag and in bad times they get hit first and the hardest, and in a recovery, it's the toughest to bounce back. These are the kinds of things, investments, that we are going to strengthen our economy and our competitiveness, create millions of jobs, union jobs, and in doing so, respect the dignity of work and empower the voice of the workers. I like that they want to create millions of union jobs. So far, I like this. The only thing I don't understand is, how is weatherizing homes, how are some of these investments I get, like the HBCUs, there's certain things I understand, but what would like things like working on climate change do to help minority communities? I don't know. I'm just saying, it doesn't make sense, but okay, we'll just go on. He says, you heard me say it before, my dad, when he lost his job in Scranton, eventually moved to Wilmington and got a good job, he'd say, Joey, a job's a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity, respect, and a place in the community. It's about being able to look at your kid in the eye and say, honey, everything's gonna be okay. When we build back better, we'll do so with higher wages, including a $15 minimum wage nationwide. Better benefits, stronger collective bargaining rights so that you can raise a family on this money. So he's talking about making the minimum wage across the board $15 minimum nationwide. Now, we know there are a lot of cities or a lot of states who already started putting something like this into effect. I know there's still a lot of places, like I believe in Kansas City, where I'm from, it's still, the minimum wage is still like $7.50, $8. So which is abysmal. Here's the hard thing about raising the minimum wage. I'm all for it, but that means all the other wages and salaries would have to go up. And the problem is I just don't see that happening. So why should a fast food worker make the same as a paramedic? You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying fast food workers shouldn't make enough to live off of. Everybody should have the right to make enough to live off of. I'm all for that. I'm just saying a lot of times when they do that, it ends up screwing people. If they don't do it right. Not saying they shouldn't do it if they don't do it right. And again, this is where you have to look at things, you have to weigh all the information and look middle of the road. We need more people and more voices that are middle of the road, because as I said before, I said this in the last video, to make a bird fly, you need the left wing and the right wing, and you need to know their strengths and their weaknesses. And I feel like that's what we have to do to come together to actually make changes that work for everybody and make our lives while we're here more enjoyable. And he says, so that the $15 minimum wage nationwide, better benefits, stronger collective bargaining rights that you can raise a family on. That's how we build the middle class back better than ever. And that was the one thing I was concerned with when it came to Trump, was that, it was like they were doing well with the economy and well with jobs. The problem was people still weren't making enough to get by. And in that area, there wasn't a big win for the regular common people. So I hope that raising the minimum wage, if they were going to do this, is also going to raise it across the board. Is that going to happen? Because we're in virus season, I doubt it. We'll have to wait and see. But then again, also we have, a few months. We have about 2.5 months before, if he is elected, he actually goes into office. So we'll have to wait and see. So he says, that's how we make sure workers are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. I can go on. I can tell you I was very encouraged by our conversation, but at this point, there's so much we can do. The only way we do any of this is if we work together. I know we can do this. He says, for example, on the call, I made it clear to the corporate leaders. I said, I want you to know that I'm a union guy. Unions are going to have increased power. It is not, they understand. It's not anti-business. It's about economic growth, creating good paying jobs. I'm all for that, guys. 11 years ago, when Barack and I took office during the Great Recession and implemented the Recovery Act that saved us from another Great Depression, we didn't see a map in the red and blue states. It was the United States of America. We didn't care whether the cities had voted for or against us. The state voted for us or against us. We work with everyone and we will recover and rebuild together as one nation. We can do this again. Refusal of Democrats and Republicans to cooperate with one another is not due to some mysterious force beyond our control. It's a conscious decision. It's a choice that we make. I agree and disagree. I think in some cases that's the case, and in other cases, at the end of the day, yeah, each one of them choose whether or not they want to work together on this, but most of them, in my opinion, or a large enough majority, have really shady agendas and things they're doing or protecting behind the scenes, which to me makes it, so we can't really trust what they're saying. He says, if we decide not to cooperate, then we can decide to cooperate. I believe this is in part a mandate for the American people. Part of the mandate they gave us. They want us to cooperate. They want us to deliver results. And the choice that Camel and I will make is that we're going to do just that. That's why I'm so pleased today we're able to bring together businesses and labor leaders to make that choice jointly with us. That's why I'm so pleased today we were able to bring together businesses and labor leaders to make the choice jointly with us. We're all Americans. Let's get to work. As I've said many times, thank you. May God bless you, and may God protect our troops. I understand now I'm going to take some questions. So then people got to ask some questions. So then one of the reporters asked about COVID. She said, I'm going to start with a question about your pandemic planning and then a question about your economic plan. You spoke about the need to access the outgoing administration's virus vaccine distribution program. What do you see as the biggest threat for your transition right now, given President Trump's unprecedented attempt to obstruct and delay a smooth transfer of power? He says, more people may die if we don't coordinate. Look, as my chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say, who handled the Ebola, the vaccine is important. It's of little use until you've been vaccinated. So how do you get the vaccine? How do you get over 300 million Americans vaccinated? What's the game plan? It's a huge, huge, huge undertaking. Get it done, prioritize those with the greatest need, and working our way through it, and also cooperate with the World Health Organization and the rest of the world in dealing with this. And so they say they have this warp speed program that not only dealt with getting vaccines, but also how to distribute them. If we had to wait until January 20th to start the planning, it puts us behind over a month and a half. And so it's important that it be done, that there be coordination now as rapidly as we can get this done. And he's talking about Trump helping them be able to do this transition so they can hit the ground running with some of these things. I will tell you, this part is a little bit concerning because during this pandemic, people have not been too kind to people with disabilities or chronic illness. As somebody with chronic illness, and I actually cannot wear a mask for too long, not because I'm taking this moment to assert my rights. There are other ways that I can do that. It's because of my physical issues. I have something called dysautonomia. And what that means is my body, the automatic functions of your body, my body has a hard time regulating blood pressure, heart rate, sometimes breathing. There are certain things like that are just automatic functions. And another one is temperature. For many years, I ran fevers on and off and nobody could figure out why, and it was exhausting. Or I would get super, super cold and couldn't get warm. My body has a hard time regulating temperature. When I put on one of those masks, I start breathing in the hot air. I get too hot too quickly, I'll black out. I've noticed people have not been kind or helpful to me about that. And I think it's interesting that people didn't care about the chronically sick or disabled and look at us as lazy, and they put a lot of different, they put a lot of different things on us. And you know what? I think I was even like that when I was younger because I'm so driven and so much a go-getter. Because you guys know me, you know my work ethic, right? I was so much like that. I was like, just push through it. But people with a chronic illness, people who are disabled, can't push through it many times. Like me, I'll push through it now and I'll end up in the hospital. So I always get irritated at my younger self for kind of being judgmental to people. And it wasn't that I was outwardly mean, but like in our heads, right? And so I think it's interesting that people who didn't care about health or the chronically sick or disabled before and now super care about health, but they still don't care about people like me who I really can't wear a mask. I'm not trying to pull one over on you. I'm not trying to just not care or assert my rights. I can't. And having to sometimes, I do it my best to politely debate clerks or workers, or I get the looks from people who are just disgusted with me, and I have to, the one selling point is I say, okay, I understand I have to wear a mask, but I physically can't. So what policies and game plans do you guys have in place for somebody with POTS and dysautonomia when I have a blackout spell, when I'm alone in your store? What's the plan to help me through that? And typically that kind of shuts everything down, but still I'm like, my concern is, we've heard Biden, he'd already said before that they're gonna have more lockdowns, and he said he's gonna make masks a requirement. He has said this, that masks will be a requirement for people. My only concern is, if you're gonna do that, you better have a system in place for people like me, people who are sick and chronically disabled, who can't wear the masks or can't get out in a safe way to get PPE, to make sure that they get the help that they need, because we have been put on the back burner too long. Guys, had I not, not to toot my own horn, but had I not been stubborn and strong-willed enough to go forward with my illness, figure it out, and then when I was told by my doctors, you're never going to be a functioning person and you'll never fully recover, we'll try to get you as functioning as possible, and you probably won't ever work, right? This was when I needed help walking and really couldn't hardly do anything. This was this last summer. I'm really grateful to be where I'm at now, where I can work. I can go out and do small things, like by myself. I'm much more functioning. I'm not there yet. I need about another year. But I'm getting there because I decided to look into things and do I said, let me look into alternative medicine. Let me look in everything that I can, because I looked into disability for myself, not that I wanted to do it. Y'all want to know how much I would have gotten? You ready? A whopping $300 a month. How do you live off that when you're alone and you don't have family help? You can't. So I really think if they want to instigate and institute all of these different policies, you better have things in place for the weakest of us. And with that being said, I don't trust as well when it comes to healthcare. I do not trust my government to know what's best for my body. I don't even trust the healthcare system. I always, anytime I have a healthcare issue, anytime I go in, I have to educate the doctors around me what's going on with me, because they don't understand it. I have to instruct them what to do to fix me if I'm having an issue. And then it's up to, I'm at their mercy and their will of whether or not they're going to actually listen to me, because I'm a woman and women aren't always taken seriously with their health issues. Neither are men, but it's worse for women. We just, they like to slap a label of anxiety and let you go on your way. But I'm one of those people, I could not get an immunization. I can't, because my immune system can't handle that. What's going to be the process for that? I hope that there's going to be some type of exemptions for people like me. I hope. I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm just saying it's a bit concerning. So he says, and so they say that this is warp speed program that not only dealt with the getting vaccines, but also how to distribute them. If we have to wait until January 20th to start the planning, then it's going to put us behind, but we want to get this rapidly done. Then he says and then this is the interviewer, on the economy, the vice president-elect talked about having an economy that works for working people. One thing I didn't hear you talk specifically about is canceling student loan debt. Does student loan forgiveness figure in your plan? Would you take executive action to achieve it? He says it does figure into my plan. I've laid it out in detail. For example, the legislation passed by the Democratic House calls for an immediate $10,000 forgiveness of student loans. That's fantastic. It's holding people up. They're in real trouble. They're having to make choices between paying their student loans and paying the rent, those kinds of decisions. Well, that's been going on for the last 20 years, y'all. Where have you been? Where's everybody been? Best decision of my life was I went to college for 1 year. I left after that 1 year because I was going to have to take out loans after that. Best decision of my life was to leave, because the amount of debt I would have gotten into and not been able to pay it back, insane. Getting a college education is not what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. It really isn't, guys. I'm not saying you should, if that's something you want to do and either you or your parents have the money, more power to you. Be very careful, because the whole premise used to be just go and get any degree. Any degree looks good. And now that's not the case. A vocal performance degree. Can you imagine $100,000 of debt for a vocal performance degree and agree to be an opera singer? A lot of good opportunities to make money out there for that. It's ridiculous. So he says, in addition to that, as you know, I think that everything from community college straight through to doubling Pell Grants to make sure we have access to free education for everyone making under $125,000 for 4 years of college. I'm all about that. I'm all about helping people be able to go to college more affordably. Absolutely. And there is a program that exists now under the law that forgives student loans for being able to engage in public services. I'm going to institute that fundamental change in that so it's able to be available to everyone that, in fact, is engaged. And it's not being very well managed right now. So I want to do all those things. Thank you. Well, Trump can't really do too much and manage it because Nobody across the board in the government would let him. Just want to throw that out there. So then somebody said, you spoke us on the dangers of the president's continued stonewalling of the transition, but it doesn't appear that and it says, of the president's continued stonewalling of the transition, but it doesn't appear that the president is going to come around anytime soon and admit defeat. So what are you going to do? What options do you have to try and ensure that you are ready to go on day one? And he says, deal with every individual organization in the country, from businesses to labor, Republicans and Democrats, to try to pull together a serious and consistent plan so we're ready on day one. Everything from staffing to ultimately naming the cabinet members, to moving along on coordinating with businesses and labor, the virus attack, how we're going to attack the virus. And so it would make it a lot easier if the president were to participate. You have a number of Republicans suggesting that. The good news here is that my colleague is still on the Intelligence Committee, so she gets the intelligence briefings. I don't anymore. So that is. But there's a number of Republicans calling for that. I'm hopeful that the president will be mildly more enlightened before we get to January 20th. Well, I think we have to go through the process. There's still a ton of evidence of voter fraud in different places, in very important key states and places, and we need to get to the bottom of it. I'm still all for Trump. I'm all for Trump getting to the bottom of it, because we need to make sure that we actually have a free and open democracy that works for us. And then she says, and what's your message to Republicans who are backing up the president's refusal to concede? You clearly need to work with them to get this moving. He says, my message is I will work with you. I understand a lot of you are reluctant because of the way the president operates, but I've been in contact with and will be in contact with more of them as we move along. And if it has to wait until January 20th to actually become operational, that's a shame, but maybe that's the only way to get it done. Thank you very much. And so then somebody else says, thank you so much, Mr. President-elect. I want to kind of piggyback off of what your thoughts are about the president's tweet over the weekend, where he first seemed to acknowledge that you won. Then he said he won't concede. Then he said, I won. How do you interpret that? At the end of the day, do you want him to concede? Joe says, I interpret that as Trumpianism. And it is kind of funny because, Trump can kind of, in certain ways, it can sound like he's going back and forth in what he says, but at the same time, you actually have to listen to what he says, because they just take everything and take it out of context. Trump, from my understanding, has specifically been saying that Joe didn't win, that he's the winner. If Joe did win, it's because there's all these things going on. I think we're all waiting to see if he can prove that in court or prove that to the American people. So he says, no change in his modus operandi. And I think the pressure will continue to build. Look, I'm having a lot of meetings with world leaders on the telephone. I cannot go into negotiating with them about things they're going to get done, but they're calling with some degree of enthusiasm. Everyone from our Holy Father to prime ministers across the globe. And so we're along knowing what the outcome will be. And as I said earlier, and I probably shouldn't repeat this, but I find it more embarrassing for the country than debilitating for my ability to get started. I think what's embarrassing for the country, in my opinion, is how much voter fraud has been going on. That to me is super embarrassing. And watching the media try to call the election when the media aren't the people to call it. So then he says, and secondly, I want to follow up with you on the vaccine. If the FDA gives emergency authorization to Pfizer or Moderna vaccine in the coming weeks, will you get vaccinated? And if you're hesitant, why should any American have confidence in vaccines? Good question. He says, well, first of all, we'll see if that comes forward. And secondly, it's important that people who are in the greatest need get it. I wouldn't hesitate to get the vaccine, but I also want to set an example. But I wouldn't hesitate to get the vaccine if, in fact, Dr. Fauci and these two organizations, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, who have been extremely responsible, conclude that it's safe to be able to get done. Look, the only reason people question the vaccine now is because of Donald Trump. That's the reason why so many people are questioning the vaccine. It's actually because there's a lot of interesting information. I'm going to put it this way. There's a lot of interesting information about vaccines. I'm just going to put it that way. I'm not saying I'm one way or another, because I can see both sides of the spectrum, and I can also see how both sides go extreme in a way that's not good. I'm just going to say there's some interesting stuff. And for people like me who are chronically sick, who have, suppressed immune systems, who, are disabled, for certain types of groups of people, this stuff just inherently isn't good for them, unfortunately. You would think, well, if your immune system isn't well, then you should be the first. Because I've heard people, or about the mask, people say, well, you say you have health issues. Well, you have asthma. Well, you should be wearing the mask more than anybody else. Well, number one, from the science, the mask doesn't protect me. It protects you. Or it doesn't protect me. It protects you against me. Number one. Number two, I just think it's funny when somebody says that because I'm like, either you clearly don't have asthma or you've never had asthma that is as severe as mine to know what restricted breathing is like. That's another thing with the masks. I already have restricted breathing. To restrict it more and get all those other issues flared up, no bueno for me. So he's saying that that's why people are now looking at vaccines weird. People have been looking at vaccines weird since about the early 2000s. So I don't agree with that statement at all. Now, but that's the thing though. He says that, but Trump has been touting getting the vaccine to people quicker. So kind of doesn't make sense. So anyways, he says that's the reason why people are questioning vaccine, because of all things he says, and he doesn't say on Twitter, whether is it truthful, is it not truthful? The exaggerations. I think we're on a clear path now. We're on a clear path with the international community and national leaders in the scientific community that have focused on these two vaccines. They appear to be ready for prime time, ready to be used. If that continues on these roads, I would take the vaccines. And then somebody asked about, you are urging the American public to continue practicing social distancing and wearing a mask, but with cases skyrocketing across the country, do you think that more governors should be closing non-essential businesses and reinstating stay-at-home orders? He says it depends on the state. I think that is a very good answer. I think it should, and Trump was really big on this. And it's funny, Joe was actually saying several things that Trump did, and Trump got ripped apart in the media, and of course Joe was getting praised. Again, I'm not saying this is a diss to Joe. I'm saying I don't trust the media. He says, depends on the state. What I failed to mention earlier is the enormous respect I have for the conservative Republican governors who have stepped up and issued mandates for wearing masks in North Dakota. That's another thing. Apparently the Dakotas are now, where the Dakotas before weren't as hit as much, now they're starting to get it. Now it's starting to become an issue, so we'll have to see how that goes. He says one of the leaders in this area between the Republican governors in Ohio, and in addition to the folks who have already been leading, like the governors of Michigan, the idea that the president's now existing remaining advisors on the virus is saying that they should resist. And so he says, what in the HELL is the matter with these guys? What is the matter with them? Resist? You know, every major individual of any consequence in the health field is saying we can save 100,000 lives between now and January 21st by wearing the masks. It's going to take a while for the vaccine to be available, distributed, and get to people. We're talking about 350 to 400,000 people not being here. What are they doing? It's totally irresponsible. And so I compliment the governors who have stepped forward, who have been stepping forward, but also the Republican governors who stepped forward. I left out the governor of Utah, a very conservative state, Governor of North Dakota, and all the Democratic governors who have been doing it all along. So I'm just saying, if there's going to be some kind of federal mandate, you better make sure and help everybody, because most of the time people fall through the cracks. He says, I ask a rhetorical question. Do you guys understand this? Does anybody understand why a governor would turn it into a political statement? It's about patriotism. It's about being patriotic. Funny enough, a lot of those same Republican governors are all about, it's always funny to me, the argument where they are super against a woman's right to choose, right? But they say, well, it's American freedom to let people do what they want with their bodies. We can't really, y'all? And look, I know it's a bit of a different argument. I know there are other factors involved. I'm just saying, I find it interesting. So he says, irresponsible, and I compliment the governors who have stepped forward and done this. So he says, I ask a rhetorical question. Do you guys understand this? Does anybody understand why a governor would turn this into a political statement? It's about patriotism. It's about being patriotic. It's about saving lives for real. It's not hyperbole. It's about being patriotic. And I think you're seeing more and more as this god-awful virus continues to spread almost unabated that governors are stepping up. He says, and just following up on that, especially with the many states reporting new highs in terms of the daily numbers of the cases and a lot of public health officials sounding the alarms over the holidays, what is your message to people who are considering, for example, getting together with their families and others on Thanksgiving? Would you urge people to reconsider their plans? Good question. He says, well, here's what I would do. Let me tell you what health experts have told me, and it's not because I'm unique and president-elect. It's because of my family. They strongly urge that if in fact we're going to have Thanksgiving with anybody, that we limit it to a maximum. They suggest of 5 people, max 10, socially distance, wearing masks. How do you can't really social distance a family gathering. And you're eating. You can't wear the masks while you eat. I don't know. There's just some of the logic doesn't make sense. And what bothers me is he says this about us getting together for Thanksgiving, but he and the media were so thrilled and happy that people took to the streets, shoulder to shoulder, singing and dancing for like 10 or 12 hours when he was elected. But that's perfectly okay, but don't get together on holidays. Again, hypocritical. It's too unsafe to vote, but go out and protest to where it turns negative. The media lies. This is what bothers me. What are we going to do? What are we doing for Thanksgiving? How are we going to do it? And we've narrowed down which family members and what we want to do, and we want to make sure they get tested, recently tested within 24 hours. And so I would strongly urge, for your sake, not just for the sake, not just your sake, for the sake of your children, your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, whoever you get together at Thanksgiving, think about this. There should be no group of more than 10 people in one room. I mean, inside the homes. That's what they're telling me. They're telling me, and they're making sure that this is the case. And I have more potent masks behind this one. I took it off when I came out here. I wear it inside. That to be masked saves lives. Again, I don't see how this is doable. At that point, it's like, well, it should just be your immediate family if that's the case. And it's not doable to tell everybody that they all need to go get tested. Honestly, first of all, who has the time and the money to do that? Secondly, do you know how overwhelmed doctors' offices and hospitals and places will be flooded with people? Everybody 24 hours before Thanksgiving getting tested? I'm just saying, that's not a possible solution. And so it says, and so look, I just want to make sure we'll be able to get together next Thanksgiving, next Christmas. It's an international crisis. It's an international health crisis. And the idea we're at war with the virus, and it is, we're at war for real. All kidding aside, I hope all of you, I watch you all. You seem to wear masks at a time when you're, and the group that follows me, that is here, follows me, that is assigned to Delaware with me, seem to do that. I strongly urge you to do that. There's nothing much about not wearing a mask unless you're like me and you can't. So, that's just going to put that out there. So somebody says, your plan that you've outlined just now about 1 million union jobs, clean energy jobs, investments in HBCUs, those are things that take time. We have a problem with long-term unemployment that's growing fast right now. What would you do right now specifically to address jobs that may not return for months, may not return ever, including in communities of color? Very good question. He says, what I would do, I would pass the HEROES Act. And remember, he just talked about the HEROES Act 6 months ago. It has all the money and capacity to take care of each of those things now, not tomorrow, now. And the idea the president is still playing golf and not doing anything about it is beyond my comprehension. You'd at least think he'd want to go on a positive note, but what is he doing? And there's virtually no discussion. And the Republicans were told, I don't know if it's true, you may know Senator, but there's 22 Republicans that say they won't vote for anything. And that's true. 22 senators out of all the senators who say not going to lift a finger to do anything for anybody, which I think is unconscionable. And he says, well, there ought to be at least a dozen of them to have the courage to stand up and save lives and jobs now. We should be doing it now, keeping those businesses open, providing the PPE, the protective equipment, as well as the PPP, the money that we allow to get people funding to take care of their businesses open. Everything from separation to testing to a whole range of things that allow businesses to stay open. That's what the plan was at the beginning. And by the way, if you notice in the very beginning, when they passed the stimulus program, the first two pieces, what happened? Businesses were staying open. And then when they weren't open, they were still able to make people be able to get paid. Well, if they're not open, I guess they're talking about the PPP money was helping with that, but that was only 8 weeks of working, 10 weeks of working capital, guys? That went nowhere very quickly because that's all been dried up. So he says, but look at where we're at now. People are running out of unemployment insurance. What are they going to do? 20 million people on the verge of losing their homes because they can't make mortgage payments. Give a large number being kicked out, and they will be kicked out on the street because they can't pay their rent. And by the way, it's not just the renters, it's the outfit that owns the building. A lot of them are multimillionaires. They're running small operations. How can they do it? This is about keeping Americans afloat. Get them through this pandemic. Get them through where their businesses are able to come back. The money's there. The money's there. And then another person says, we're almost done, guys, says, and also on the economic front, as we fight the pandemic, world trade continues. And there's a great debate over world trade agreements, international trade agreements. It seems that in the last couple days, 15 countries, Asia-Pacific countries, have signed onto a new trade deal, the RCEP. Should the United States consider joining that trade agreement, he says. I've talked with a number of these world leaders. As I told them under the law, I'm not able to begin to discuss with them. There's only one president at a time as to who can say what the policy will be. So I'm reluctant to answer that question right now, but here's what I can say. We make up 25% of the world's trading capacity, of the economy, of the world. We need to be aligned with other democracies around another 25% more or so that can set the rules of the road instead of having China and others dictate outcomes because they are only game in town. A lot of that I can agree with. And he says, but what I'm insisting on and what I've been asked by world leaders as to what to do, without going into detail, I've said, but I want you to know that there are 3 things that are going to happen if I'm elected. 1, we're going to invest in American workers and make them more competitive. Good. Number 2, we're going to make sure that labor is the table and environmentalists are at the table in any trade deals we make. We'll see how that goes, okay? And I'm not looking for punitive trade. The idea that we are poking our fingers in the eyes of our friends and embracing autocrats makes no sense for me. But I'm reluctant to get more into detail at this moment. I promise you I have a pretty thorough plan, and I hope you are prepared to announce that to you on January 21st. And then somebody else, and last one, says, you have indicated that you want to make changes to U.S. international policy on the fronts like the Paris climate change. He says, yes, that's a generic notion of rejoining, but I didn't get into details of what that will do in an agreement. The same thing with rejoining the World Health Organization. And the person says, but why not here? He says, because you're asking me about whether I join a specific proposal, the details of which are now still being negotiated among those nations. It's requiring negotiations. So that's what was said. The only thing I feel like we didn't hear in this, and I'm sorry, I know this was a long one, guys, but I really wanted to go over this in detail, is stimulus checks. That's still missing in this. So, and we do know with the HEROES Act, there was supposed to be stimulus checks. My gripe with the HEROES Act, it's only a one-time payment. I do wonder with Joe, though, if between he and Kamala Harris, they're going to try to get something that would be recurring. The only problem is, even if they did, are we going to have Crypt Keeper, curmudgeon Mitch McConnell go ahead and say no to everything all the time? I'll tell y'all, I'm getting more and more worried about McConnell being in office because it sounds like he doesn't want anybody to get help on anything. So this is going to get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean stupid and scary, where this is going to go and how this gets done. All right, guys, if you like this video, please do me a big favor. Give me a big thumbs up, like the video, hit subscribe, hit notifications so you can be notified what's coming in the pipeline for you and your stimulus money, the election, and everything in between with politics. Also, sound off in the comments, guys. I want to hear everything you have to say. And guys, please make sure and share this content with as many people who are struggling. People on unemployment, waiting for unemployment, stimulus checks, SBA loan and grant issues, bill issues, everything in between. I've got tons of tools and resources to help you on this channel through this difficult time, and I would love to have the opportunity to do just that. And guys, the more you like, subscribe, comment, notifications, share the content, the more my channel grows, the more things I can do to get back to you pretty people. So for instance, doing $100 gift card giveaways, very simple. All you have to do, like the video, subscribe, hit notifications, comment, share the content, boom. You're eligible, you're entered, that's all you have to do. Do it for every video you see, and the more times you share, the more times you comment, the more chances you have to win. So if you share it 100 times, if you comment 100 times, you are 100 times more likely to win. Yay, good luck. I love hearing all your comments. I love seeing what you in the comment section. So many of you post multiple comments. I love it. It helps the channel, and then I can help you. Also, I announced this in another video, but I'll go ahead and say it again. Because I've had to take so much time off this month and over the last month and a half because things keep coming up. Like right now, my internet is down to where it takes 3 to 4 hours to upload any video, and nobody can come until Thursday. So I'm praying once everything gets fixed, I can smoothly continue just to upload content and build this channel. But until then, money is tight because when I don't work, I don't make anything. So I'm going to roll over the gift card giveaway to this next coming up Monday. So I apologize, but I have to, because I have to also try to make some money to stay afloat. So, and that's none of that's your guys' fault. You know how life is. Sometimes it's just a ton of stuff will come up and will happen in life, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just got to kind of roll with the punches and go with the flow, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. Okay, guys, I'm going to end it here. This was probably the longest video I've done, but I really wanted to go over this comprehensively to make sure you had all the right information and so you know what's coming. Take care. Blessings. I love you guys so much. Find me on Facebook, Katie's Insight. Like the page. Join the group, Katie's Corner. It'll be changed to Katie's Insight soon, but right now it's Katie's Corner. We're helping everybody with stimulus in your respective areas across the country. Much love, guys. Take care. Blessings. I'll see you soon. Mwah. Goodbye.